neutral to less than healthy workplace, you can have a positive impact. And that's what our 5 languages of appreciation about, is that people want to feel valued. They want to feel appreciated. Most people don't. That's sort of the negative state of things. And some key factors is that not everybody feels appreciated in the same way. So not everybody likes a compliment or wants you to spend time with them. So our book, and we have an online assessment that goes with it, helps provide the tool to find out both how you and your team members like to be appreciated. And that's a good start, at least.
I've learned so much over this first year of podcasting, and I wanted to share with you guys the 10 most life-changing lessons that I've learned this year. So I created a document, and it's on my website. What you're going to do, you're going to go there. It's going to be 10 life-changing lessons. Click on that button. It'll ask for your email address so I can email it to you. Sign up for it, because these life lessons radically changed the way I viewed my life and the way I started living. It helped me to get better in the areas that I've so desperately wanted to see progress and growth in. And because I know they helped me, I really believe that they will help you. And I wanted this to be a gift for you guys. So I really hope you enjoy this gift, and go to the website, thewholepersonpodcast.com, to get it. It's free. And I hope you guys enjoy and learn as much as I did from it. Today, we have an awesome guest. We have psychologist and author, speaker, consultant, Dr. Paul White, who for the past 20 years, he has worked on many, many businesses, schools, government agencies, nonprofit organizations by helping them to create a workplace where staff relations are well lived within the work environment. There's an element of cynicism sometimes in the work environment where there's negative or poor relationships. You know, we all have that coworker that we don't like. But Dr. Paul has written a book about how to have good relationships with your coworkers and in the workplace. So welcome to the show, Dr. Paul White. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Evan. I'm glad to be here.
Good. So briefly, just tell us a little bit about your book and the crux of it.
Sure. I actually have 4 books, but the main one that I think we'll talk about today is The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace, which co-authored with Dr. Gary Chapman. People may be familiar with The 5 Love Languages, which Dr. Chapman wrote. It's been a great New York Times bestseller for a number of years. It sold like 18 million copies. It's crazy that way. And he and I applied those concepts to work-based relationships. And so we're up around almost 500,000 copies now for ours, so thankful for that. And then wrote actually a book on toxic workplaces, rising above a toxic workplace, and then also the vibrant workplace, sort of how to get super, super practical when you're encountering challenges of creating a positive workplace.
So I don't know about you, but I have had my fair share of negative work environments. So between 2010 and 2014, I had over 21 jobs.
Wow.
And some of them were really, really bad work environments where I quit. Some I got fired. A lot of other jobs were also temp. So, you know, it wasn't it was a seasonal job. So
Sure.
It wasn't like, you know, I was getting fired left and right by any means.
Right.
And several things that I learned through this process is that I liked to control my environment, and I liked to try to control how people would treat me. And when people would not treat me the way I thought I should be treated, I bucked the system, which didn't normally go well, especially when I had leadership that was extremely poor. And I wasn't afraid to say, hey, you shouldn't do this or treat people this way. And then that inevitably got me fired.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So just coming right at it, there's so many people in similar situations where they're in an environment that they're working that they don't like because of a person or because of something that's going on. What advice would you give to someone in that situation on how to stick it out?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I'm actually just yesterday and today in the midst of finalizing a training I'm giving up in Chicago for a group of managers of long-term care facilities, which is a very difficult kind of workplace these days. I mean, not great pay, not great prestige, lots of demands emotionally, and they're tough workplaces. And so one of the things that we have to understand is that a negative experience, I mean, there's lots of components that go together to that. And in fact, when we write about toxic and talk about toxic workplaces, we talk about sick systems, which is sort of like poor communication, indirect communication, bad decision making, different kinds of things like that, not holding people accountable. Toxic leaders is a third part, or a second part. And then the third part is dysfunctional colleagues, people that blame and make excuses and all that. And then a key component is our response too, because we're not perfect, and also how we respond can make it go better or less well. But I think a key starting component is understanding our expectations, because as a psychologist, one of the things that we know that our feeling responses really are a reaction to our expectations that we bring to a situation, and then our experience in reality. If those match, if things go well or match our expectations, we feel good about it, pleased, happy, whatever. If they don't, then we sort of go the other direction, and that could be either frustrated or disappointed or anger or whatever. And I find that a key part that has to happen, especially in new, smaller organizations, or for people who are sort of entering in either at entry level or mid level, is checking your expectations of what this place is supposed to be like, what their supervisor is supposed to be like, and how they're supposed to act. Does that make sense?
No, totally. One of the things that one reason why I had so many jobs is because I was in such desperate need of a job. I just took the first thing available and never checked expectations. It wasn't until I became my own boss as a real estate agent did I start flourishing. So how does a person who either A, is getting ready to take on a new position, communicate and understand expectations of what's required of them or their bosses or what they want in those relationships? And then the second kind of caveat, because it's a two-part question, for the person that's been there a long time and then realizes, hey, these expectations aren't right, or they should be different. How can I change the environment?
Yeah.
What advice would you give us on those two areas?
Yeah. Let me first give our website, because it's sort of the mothership for the different resources that I'm going to mention. So it's called appreciationatwork.com, and it's the word at, so appreciationatwork.com. And it has information about the 5 language appreciation, about toxic workplaces and so forth. So actually, I've written a couple pamphlets. One is how to decide when it's time to leave your job, but the other one is how to avoid being hired by a toxic workplace. Because you don't want to, it's sort of like bad relationships. You don't want to go from one bad one to another bad one and keep that going, right? So part of it is when you're coming into either a new type of work, a new industry for you, or a new organization, the more information you can gather from others who have already worked there is going to be really helpful. So it's, when we interview, a lot of times, feel the pressure, it's about us, but it's also about them. And we need to find out, okay, people that are successful here and maybe enjoy their work, what kind of characteristics do they have? Or what kind of person really doesn't fit well here? I mean, I have an organization, we have 7 or 8 people that work for me. And, if you're not a self-starter and or you need lots of close supervision, it's not a good match, because that's not how I manage and that's not how we work. Not necessarily, a good versus bad. Sometimes it's style stuff. So you want to talk to people who either work there, have worked there, worked in the industry. What's it like to work on a surgical floor in a hospital? That's different than working in a doctor's office, right? And so lots of times I find, especially for younger people or people re-entering the workforce, that they don't have that much knowledge about what the actual job looks like. How much paperwork is there? I mean, people want to become a psychologist because they want to help people. You got to be willing to do paperwork and do, insurance forms, all this kind of stuff. So a lot of it is sort of interviewing and seeking out, and there's good websites too, where you want to find out what does a chemical engineer do, that kind of stuff. Um, and so part of it is getting accurate information of what people really do in their day-to-day work.
So now let's put the shoe on the other foot. I'm currently at a job
Yeah.
that I've been to that I didn't check expectations, that I'm not enjoying. I like the work, but how do I go from issues with expectations in my current work environment to resolving those?
Yeah. So I've been married 40 years, mainly out of the grace and patience of my wife more than anything. And those of us that have been in long-term relationships, sometimes you realize at some point, hopefully you realize you cannot change another person. All right. And so that we can influence other people, but we can't change them. We can't make them change. And so I think that's an important distinction, because even in a neutral to less than healthy workplace, you can have a positive impact. And that's what our 5 languages of appreciation about, is that people want to feel valued. They want to feel appreciated. Most people don't. That's sort of the negative state of things. And some key factors is that they want to, not everybody feels appreciated in the same way. So not everybody likes a compliment or wants you to spend time with them. So our book, and we have an online assessment that goes with it, helps provide the tool to find out both how you and your team members like to be appreciated. And that's a good start, at least. So part of it is accepting reality that you can't change people. You also probably can't change the organization, the rules, or the industry. I mean, that there's certain government rules and regs, there's insurance stuff you got to deal with. And so part of it is accepting reality and figuring out, can I function in this realm as it's defined? And it maybe, or a better question would be, is how long do I think I can do this? It's not an either or, but it's like, what do I need to do to survive? And I would say one of the key parts that we found along the way is, whether it's healthy or not, and whether you're trying to create some more positive, it's best to get a support person along with you. You need a sounding board, because when we're, especially in a negative, toxic environment, we start to think weird, because it sort of creates a fog in us, and we're not always thinking clearly. And that's where we have these extreme reactions, like we're going to go ballistic on this person because they deserve it. Whereas you bounce it off of a trusted friend or colleague, or maybe somebody outside of work, and say, am I thinking straight about this? It seems like this, and I want to do this. And they're going to give us some feedback. It's really important to have that, because otherwise we can sort of be bouncing around and go off in our thoughts in sort of a distorted way that's not really helpful.
So let me ask you this, based off of marital relationships, how good is your spouse, not your specific spouse, but in the situation, to balance?
Mine is great.
Right. But and it could be based upon each marriage. I know my wife and I over the years have tried to be each other's sounding board.
Sure.
And honestly, it freaks the other person out. I mean, it's gone both ways, where and that goes towards, different financial struggles at different times, where we're like, oh, you hate your job, please don't quit, please don't quit, please don't quit, or please don't get fired, please don't get fired,
Right.
Yeah.
So in the marital situation, part of it is that, and if people haven't read the 5 love languages, I would say it saved my marriage, and it's just a great book. That's why it sells more every year than the prior year. But it has to do with your communication style. And one of the things my wife and I had to work out is, when we're sharing something, what do we want from the other person? And if we can, because I'm not good at reading her and what she wants. I don't know if she just wants to tell me about her day so that we sort of connect. I don't know if she wants to vent. I don't know if she wants input, whatever. And so if she can frame that up front and say, hey, I just really just need to vent, so just listen, and we'll go from there. That helps the process. And often in marital situations, because there's impact about anxiety about pay and all that, it's often turns into venting, which is fine. And then you look to somebody else who's maybe a little less personally or emotionally connected to you or the situation, to get that kind of objective feedback. I think a combination of those is good, because with your spouse, you want the emotional support, the relational support, and And usually if they start giving advice, at least for us guys, that often doesn't go well unless, we've set that expectation up. So I would tend to have those roles separate a little bit.
Gotcha. Okay. Now I want to, that was just a caveat because that's something that I know in my marriage we need to do better at. But in regards to the 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace, what are the 5?
Yeah, well, they're the same in name as the 5 love languages, but they look different in daily life. So words of affirmation, quality time, acts of service, tangible gifts, and even physical touch, which is always a fun and interesting one to talk about at work. But those are the languages. And what's interesting in the 5 love languages and in personal relationships, we let's say we know what their language is. Let's say it's quality time. We either know or we can find out pretty easily what that looks like practically. In the workplace, we found that was more difficult. And so we created this online assessment. It's called the Motivating by Appreciation Inventory. A code to take it comes with the book, and then you can buy codes separately for people that don't want the book. And it identifies not only your language, but also the actions that are important to you and from whom you want those. So for example, quality time is a great example because in past decades, people wanted individual time with their supervisor or manager. They'd want to either be able to share, get input and so forth. That's less and less true with younger employees that's okay for them, but they really want to hang out with their colleagues. And they want to maybe go out to lunch, go out after work, watch sports, whatever. And so because you can get the language right, but miss the action and still sort of miss the target. And so we allow people to choose not only their language, their actions, help them determine their language, but choose their actions and also from whom they want which actions. Because some people may want to get together and watch the Chiefs win again this weekend. Hopefully.
Heck yeah.
And we'll see. This is probably delayed and we'll see what happens. But you're not going to invite your supervisor, right? And so it allows for specificity that way.
Okay. One thing I do notice with the younger generation specifically is they do like connection within the workplace. Mm-hmm. And even through more observation, you want to enjoy, and I think this is with anyone, you want to enjoy the people that you're around the majority of your life when you're working. But I've noticed the trend going not just people that I work with, but almost its own community and family. And mm-hmm. So when it comes to the workplace environment and building connections or quality time, acts of service, would you say just like in marriage, you have to learn to read each coworker and see what their love language or their what's
language
the correct
of appreciation?
Word?
Yeah.
Language of appreciation would be to respond or to cooperate in that regards?
Yeah, and in fact, that's sort of a key aspect of our model. If you try to communicate appreciation in a language that's not important to the other person, it's sort of frustrating for both people because you're doing stuff. Let's say you give compliments and all that. You say, well, man, I tell you thank you, and I tell you you're good at this. But the other person is like, yeah, but words don't mean that much to me. I mean, I've had people say, I grew up in a culture where if somebody praised you, the next thing that was coming was an ask, right? And so it's sort of like, then they respond, well, what do they set me up for? What do they want from me? And so for them, quality time or acts of service, there's some people that you can talk all day long, but if you don't help them out when they're working on a project and need a little bit of help to get past, get ready for the deadline, it doesn't matter. So that's why we've created the inventory and resources on the website, the appreciationatwork.com website, it's a free chart that you can plot your coworkers on, the languages, their actions. We actually have sort of a cubicle poster that you can design and post there, and we have that in our hallway, so that so people learn how to their colleagues want to be shown appreciation. It's nice to take it for yourself, but really the goal is to find out how to communicate it effectively to those that you work with.
So my question is, how do you do that? I can go to my wife and say, hey, let's take this test to find out what our languages of appreciation are, or our love languages, our personality tests. We've done a lot of that so we can coexist fairly pleasantly. In the work environment, you're not really going to go up to your coworker and say, hey, I want you to take this test so I know how to respond to you.
Right.
How do you as an individual figure out people's language of appreciation?
Well, like anything, it's often a process, and it depends on your relationship and also your role. But lots of times, and we've worked with people who had just, a regular desk job, or they were the receptionist, whatever. They weren't supervising. They read the book, they took it, they found it interesting. They maybe had the book sort of sitting on their desk, or we send out a weekly email about with a little article. We have videos, and it's sort of like, hey, I read this book, thought it was sort of interesting, and I thought it'd be sort of interesting to find out how our team liked to be shown appreciation. That everybody likes it differently. And it's low cost. I mean, it's $15, per person, and so you talk to your supervisor or the HR person and have them go to our website. I mean, we've had over 230,000 people take it worldwide, and it's in like 8 languages, and from daycares and preschools to hospitals to public schools to manufacturing firms, government agencies, everywhere. And because people like to it's sort of interesting. They like to find out about it, as long as it's a mutual thing. It's not like, hey, here, read this, and here's my report on how to show me appreciation. Give me a gift, kind of thing. So, it takes a little bit of time, but it's an easy read. The book takes maybe and it do chapters, so it's not too hard to introduce it to people. Sometimes it takes a little time, but it works over time.
There's a lot of different personality traits out there, and ironically, I do have this conversation with people more often when they are talking to me about their current work environment and a particular person or manager or something or someone that they don't like. And all they do is allow themselves to be walked on, and they take it, and then they just grow in bitterness, anger, and resentment.
Sure.
And, one reason why, I got let go so many times is because I decided I wasn't going to get bitter, angry, hurt, or resent, so I was going to stand up for myself. Where's the balance between the two? How do you balance communicating, hey, I don't appreciate this, or hey, please communicate to me this way, in a respectful way? And I mean, obviously it does, the expectation or the way the other person responds will depend on how it goes, but
sure.
How do I do that
well, it's going to differ for different people, but I come from a worldview where I believe God created each one of us, and as a result, each of us has value, and one of our core messages is that people have value, employees have value beyond performance. I mean, employee recognition programs focus on performance, and we demonstrate and show how employee recognition programs really don't work in helping people feel appreciated, because it's not individual, it's not personalized, it's not about them, it's performance based. But it starts there with understanding that each person, has value, even though they're different, even though they torque me off and I don't really like them. And so, to me, it sort of harkens back to trying to be kind and considerate, gentle, maybe speaking the truth in love, not just, sort of glossing over stuff, but doing it in a way that's helpful to them. And I think that's sort of the key, right? I mean, what's the motivation? Is it that I'm trying to be helpful to them or help build a healthy relationship, or I just want to let them know what a jerk they are sometimes? I mean, that kind of message isn't going to go well no matter how you package it typically. And so I think the balance is sort of where you're coming at, what your goal is, and understanding again that they may or may not change. I mean, you can give them feedback, and trying to respond with patience. But the flip side, and see, I'm a little different than most. I mean, I'm fairly proactive and don't let people walk over me, and maybe sometimes too much, so I'm too blunt. But I don't think it's helpful. Lots of times, people that are a little bit more passive in relationships, that's based out of fear of either being rejected or, being fired or whatever. And so they have to deal with that anxiety, fear side of things. Well, so, I think it is that we give people reality-based. And let me give you an example that I think will help is the more, and this is true whether you're giving a positive kind of message or maybe some corrective criticism, the more specific you can be, the better. Versus, the worst kind of message is, I think you just act like a jerk, right? Or the worst is you are a jerk, but then you act like a jerk, and then, so you got an anger problem, and then, but you can say, it sort of offended me the other day when in front of the rest of the team, you called me out on something which I needed to be called out on, but doing it in front of people really intensely was, some of the words you used, that didn't work for me. And I'm wondering if we can talk about doing that differently. So the more specific you can be, I think the better it's going to go. If you just give generalizations, people don't know what to do with it.
That's really, really good. I think one of my favorite takeaways there is that oftentimes people do nothing out of fear. And that in and of itself is something that as individuals we have to overcome in order to have a healthier expectation or a healthier mindset when we communicate with others.
And let me just clarify that. Fear in and of itself is not a bad thing. There are certain fears that are good. To be hit by a truck in the street is, and so, or you lose your job just on the spot, so it has to do with degree and setting. That fear helps us sort of measure our responses and do I really want to do this? Do I want to take the risk? Is it worth it? Or am I, just sort of catastrophizing and thinking that if I say this, that not only am I going to lose my job, I'm going to become homeless in 6 months and, all that kind of thing that we do in our head sometimes.
So if you're able to, as a listener, to write this down, Dr. Paul just said something. Fear helps us measure our responses. I think within the Christian world, we just lump the word fear in a very negative category, that all fear is from Satan, so to say, that's right. A tool. It's almost exclusively taught that way. You are right. Like there is this healthier fear or wisdom that God put in us not to go running into the street so we don't get hit by a car. I have a healthy fear of meeting a grizzly bear in the woods who just got done hibernating. Sure. So that makes a lot of sense. Well, some of our listeners are entrepreneurs who are in sales, and what I'm about to say, I don't want people to assume that, I'm trying to think of the right word here. I don't want people to assume that this is just a manipulation tactic to get a desired result. When it comes to clients that I meet that I want to help them in selling their home or someone else selling a product, how does someone very quickly understand their language of appreciation with meeting them for the first time? And the whole reason of doing that isn't just to get the sale, but it's so that you can effectively communicate the way that they want to be communicated to, thus creating a better process for that individual.
Yeah. So Evan, you're not the first one to ask that question. I've been doing this work for about, 11, 12 years now, and have to think through it in both in the sense of sales. It actually also relates to virtual teams, believe it or not. So hang in there. But what I've learned and come to believe, at least, is that true appreciation of a person requires a relationship. That there is recognition for performance or, for an action, and you thank people. But to truly appreciate somebody, you got to know them. And so when we try to show or communicate appreciation to a person we don't know well or have a relationship with, there's a lot of dangers there. One, it feels manipulative often. Secondly, you're usually going to miss the mark because you don't know them and know what's important to them. Third, that it's going to feel weird to them. I was working with a virtual team and they were trying to communicate I mean, they had never met each other. They were working on different continents and all that. And I just said, I don't think it's going to work, but we'll try. It was with a major, big, IT company. And we tried it, and it didn't work because it's like, I don't even know them. I don't know anything about them, their life or whatever. So I think in sales, you have to be careful about that. That if it's an ongoing customer, somebody that and are able to serve, I think that's a better setting. But if you're trying to gain a customer, or they're a potential customer, I would not try to go that direction because it tends to not go well.
Okay. So let's say I am a peon in a business or organization. How do I use this to create and maybe it's not up to me as an individual to create change, but how can I influence culture in such a way that gratitude and appreciation becomes more of the norm by being a cultural influence?
Yeah. So hold on to your hat here, Evan, or your seat, okay? Because this is gonna rock your world, okay? Psychologists, we specialize in the obvious, but here it is. You start with yourself, okay? You start by changing your own attitude, like around gratitude. And one of the things about negative workplaces is if you think about it as being a kind of a fire, two ways to put out a fire. One is you don't add fuel, okay? So if you're in a negative environment, don't go join into the grumbling and complaining and blaming, okay? That's the first step. Secondly, in a fire, you throw water on it, okay? And the way you throw water on a negative environment is you bring up a positive perspective. It doesn't have to be about a person. It could be just, it's winter here now. And you can say, man, I'm glad I work inside versus outside. If I were roofing, in the snow, I'm just thankful it's in the summer. I'm thankful for air conditioning. And it's sort of like, man, that just sort of douses the negativity. Now it's somebody that really wants to go there can keep going there, but let them, and you just say, hey, I'll catch you guys later. You just don't even sort of condone it by your presence. And so you start where you are. And like with the appreciation thing, we've had this happen in a lot of places. It started with just one person in an office, and they found our book, they took the inventory, they sort of shared it with others, or maybe one of our articles that are, we got 300 out there or more. And then they find somebody else that's interested, and the two of them start, and you just start with the people that you interact with on a day-to-day basis. And what's interesting is it sort of catches on. I mean, and we've had it go viral through, I don't know, Miller Coors and DirecTV and ExxonMobil and different kinds of places. But it didn't start big coming down. It started just with an individual who was interested.
When we talk about corporations that seem to do this pretty well, the one that pops into my mind is ChickfilA.
Mm-hmm.
They have at least from the customer service perspective,
they got it down.
They've got it down because it's not always about. Go ahead.
No, well, I was just gonna say, and not necessarily at the big corporate level, although we've been approved as a vendor for them, but we have individual Chick-fil-A operators that use our stuff because it matches their culture. I mean, it's how to, be positive and very specific to the people you're relating to.
Right. So let me ask you, what questions have I not asked you that I should have asked you?
Well, so I would say that it's sort of a hidden question, but lots of times, especially for entrepreneurs, it's like, I don't have time for this, right? I mean, in fact, I guess I could say the biggest obstacle, the book that I wrote, The Vibrant Workplace, identified 10 of the most common obstacles to creating a culture of appreciation. And one of those is busyness. I mean, that is the number one issue that people say, I don't have time for this. And so the fact is that it doesn't take a lot of time, like even quality time. It's not like somebody wants to be your best friend. I had one CFO tell me, she said, hey, I just want somebody to stop by my office for 5 minutes, check in, see how I'm doing. And then I'm booting them because I got too much work to do. And so it doesn't take a lot of time. The other thing that we found is that when team members feel valued, it actually creates more time for you, because here's what goes away when team members feel valued: tardiness, absenteeism, staff turnover, customer complaints, conflict over stupid little things like your parking spot or how big your monitor is, all the kinds of things that aren't really productive, uh, tend to melt away when team members feel valued, because when they feel valued, those things sort of slough off. And so while busyness seems like, the deal, and especially for entrepreneurs, I mean, I am myself, it, it if you it's sort of like, we use an example in the book, it's sort of like taking vitamins. If you can't just do a mega dose once and you're good to go for life, right? I mean, you take a vitamin a day, and over time it gives you the micronutrients that you need. Same thing with appreciation. It's not like you have to do this big deal, but just start. I always say start somewhere with someone, and that gets going, and then it can grow from there.
As an entrepreneur who doesn't have staff, but the people in my life are the ones who would refer me business.
Mm-hmm.
How do I create a culture of appreciation for them? Because that's something that I have been thinking about for a long time. And one of the things I started doing, and I'm a little hit and miss on it, but I'm getting more consistent, is I send thank you cards out. I identified 100 people in my life that I just want to consistently show appreciation to. And as of right now, all I'm doing is sending out cards and birthday cards and stuff like that. And I'm intentional about it. I'm not doing it to try to get a sale or anything like that. I realized that these 100 plus people are the people who have been most impactful in my life in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps ground me being grateful for others. But how, outside of just sending thank you cards, what are some other ways to show appreciation to people, but even on a non-monetary scale? Because obviously you can't just spend a lot of money on every single person.
No, it's not about gifts. I mean,
right.
So of the over 200,000 people that take, I mean, we've done a bunch of research, and one of the research studies, we showed that, and we've known this all along, that tangible gifts is the primary language for only 6% of employees and people in the workforce. So you don't have to spend a lot of money. You don't have to give a lot of gifts. And you're wise to start with cards, because the most frequent language is words of affirmation. It's 46% of the population find words to be the most preferred language for them. Now, not everybody really needs or wants. 20-something guys don't give a rip about a handwritten note. I mean, you might as well send them a text. It's going to be just effective for them, most of them. And then you have time and so forth. So part of it is getting to know them and what they like in their life. I mean, like, I saw you, gesture when I talked about the Chiefs. So, Chiefs fan. I mean, or if you're a Raider fan, which is a problem. So, or what, or you like soccer, or what kind of food they like. And the issue is to be personal about it. Okay, whatever it is, it's sort of like, hey, in fact, I found out that a relative of my daughter-in-law likes red wine, and I happen to have a connection through some business I did with a good red wine producer, and gave them a bottle. And it was meaningful to them because they like that. I don't just give bottles. I mean, I give 5 in a year. I mean, it's not that. So it's finding out what they like, what do they like to do, go do it with them, or go, give them a gift certificate if they like to go to movies or whatever. So it's about being personal. And then if you're going to communicate appreciation, again, the more specific you can be. It's like, hey, I really value it when you did this for me. And part of the message, we tell people to use people's names when you write a note, or even verbally. It's like, hey, Stacy, thank you for whatever it is. Be real specific. And then the third part is tell them why it was important to you. Stacy, thanks so much for getting back to me with that contact information for that person, because that really saved me some time and energy being able to connect with them. And we'll see where things go. So you got to username, be specific, and then tell them why it's important to you.
That's funny. I was writing that down because I was going to bullet point that, but you just did. So use their name, what they did, and what it meant to me.
Right. And it doesn't always have to be me. It can be why it's important to me, to the organization, to our customers. If it's an employee, say, I really appreciate you getting back quickly to these people because I know that they're, on a tight time frame and we got the information they needed.
Okay. So for the person that's in a toxic work environment and they're afraid to leave because of money, because
Sure.
of whatever reason, what advice would you give that person?
So I'm going to use a double negative. Don't do nothing. Okay. So in other words, do something. So a lesson I learned from a mentor of mine said, try to avoid uh, making getting in a desperate situation, because when we're desperate, we tend to not make good decisions. So if you're in a toxic workplace, one of the things you want to do is we have an assessment. It's called the ROTS, the Rating of Toxic Symptom Scale, and you can find it on our website. And it sort of says, because most of us, it's like, is this normal work? Is this bad? Is it, unhealthy, or is it deadly and toxic? I don't know. And it helps sort of identify how bad your workplace is. But one of the things you want to do is you want to be doing something along the way so that in 6 months or a year or whatever, you're more able and ready to move on, whether that's saving some money, whether that's getting your resume together, whether that's taking a course to get your skills up in, computer programming or whatever it might be. So and then the other thing is you got to have social support if you're in a toxic workplace, because you've got to have somebody that helps you think clearly about it. And you have to take care of yourself, because if you don't, nobody else will. But don't just sit there and sort of whine and moan. I'm not about, when I work with toxic, people in toxic workplaces, it's not, I'm not just there to sort of, pat their back and say, oh, isn't that bad? It's like, okay, what are we going to do about this? So you've got to start to develop a plan of some little steps you can do to be ready to go when you need to, and, in the future.
Well, and one thing I'm recently learning about toxic work environments is that if you don't plan and prepare to make your exit, an exit will inevitably be thrust on you when you're not ready.
Right. Yeah. You want to take charge of that to the best degree you can.
Absolutely. So I like to end each show with 3 questions. And the first question is, in coming from psychology, you understand the importance of self-talk, both how it affects you positively and negatively. And one of the reasons why I asked this question is to essentially make our very knowledgeable guests seem more human in this next question, which is, what negative self-talk have you struggled with in the past or currently struggle with?
Oh, I can't relate to that at all. No, I think for me, I'm pretty proactive and driven. Uh, a statement that I have to really fight is that I don't have enough time, and I think that may be true for a lot of us. Part of it has to do with my faith and my spiritual beliefs that, if I am attempting to do or follow God the best way I know how, then He's provided the time I need to do what's necessary. And I don't, I'm one of those fear of missing out. I'm a boomer that, got oh, how bad is that? So, but it's like, man, if I don't do it now, I'm going to miss this opportunity. Well, God's already in control of everything, and the Bible teaches about how He's ordained when we were born and where and what's happening in our lives, and so I have to trust that. And the other part of that is I just have to do the next thing. That's sort of the action part of it. It's like, okay, I'm not going to get everything done, but I need to do the next thing, and then I figure out what the next thing is, and what do you know? Some things get done, and so that's it for me.
Okay, here's the next question. What is the best decision you've ever made?
Well, I think the best decision I've ever made, and it's actually, I don't know if it's a decision, but it's a series of decisions, is to trust God and in the person of Jesus, and trusting that He made me. He's in control of the world. I can't get past creation. I mean, creation, the stars and everything, it's just so mammoth. And then you go down to the micro level. It's just like, dude, to me, it's harder to believe there's not a God than there is a God. And to trust that he cares for me and learn how to live life within that.
Expound on that.
Well, if I accept, and it has to do with some intellectual work for me, at least, of accepting that Jesus was a person who came here. There's a lot of good evidence that he lived, he died, obviously, and that he even, rose from the dead afterwards, and that his life was very special. Then, he wasn't just a prophet, and sort of understanding all of that together, and the implications of that God's in control of stuff, that he made a way for me to get to know him through Christ, and he cares about me. Then the flow from that is like, dude, relax. Whatever bad happens here, it's going to work out. Maybe not in this life, but it'll work out ultimately. And so that's sort of the best, I guess, daily decision I make.
Okay. So here's the last question. What brings you peace?
That does. I mean, what brings me peace is resting in the fact that the world and the universe is just huge, mammoth, billions of people I can't get my head around. And that I don't have to worry about it because we're here by purpose. We have a creator that cares for us, and he's going to take care of me, and I don't have to worry about stuff. So, I mean, it's a challenge for me, but that's how I get there.
Perfect. Now, before we go, I want you to share your website one more time. That way people can go to it, and briefly a description of the books that you have written.
Sure.
And you can find them, I'm sure, at your website, or I'll also post a link to them on my website.
Yeah, and they're on Amazon too. So Appreciation at Work, again, it's the word at, not the at side, appreciationatwork.com. So that gets you there. I've written or co-authored with Dr. Chapman the 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace. We co-authored a book called Sink or Swim, SYNC or Swim. It's sort of a story or a fable version of it. It's like a 1-hour airplane read. It's a lot of fun. Then I wrote Rising Above a Toxic Workplace. And then the last one is The Vibrant Workplace. And so, if you Google me, Dr. Paul White, and put the word appreciation in there, you're going to get there. So.
Awesome. Well, sir, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on today,
Sure.
Blessing us with your time, and just really appreciative of the work and life experience that you have, because, you would think that learning the ideas of appreciation would be fairly standard and fairly knowledgeable for every human being to just appreciate others. Mm-hmm. But for whatever reason, it's not. And because of men like you, we have more knowledge because of it. So thank you for that.
You bet. I appreciate your words.
Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
When I started this podcast, it was important for me to lead by example, that I wouldn't hide behind a fake mask, acting like I've arrived and speaking from the mountaintop. My whole purpose was to be vulnerable about where I was, my failures, my struggles, and my successes, so that I could be a bridge, that I could be a gap in this process of showing people how to change in the areas of faith, family, finances, friendship, fitness, and fun, because that's exactly where I'm at and what I'm doing. And I had a coach years ago, and he was the first coach I've ever had. And he did it for a very affordable rate because I couldn't afford anything more than what he offered me. But he told me this: Evan, someday you're going to get in a spot where you're going to be able to give back to others. And I want you to remember what I'm doing for you here and now, that it's made affordable so that you can actually go through it. He goes, I believe in you, and I trust that you'll do this. And so because of that, it resonated within me that at a certain point, when I felt I've had enough hard knocks that I had something to offer other people, I would start a coaching program. And this is that. I am now starting a coaching program, and I'm going to make it affordable because by the graces of someone else that helped me out when I was first starting my journey, I wanted to do the same for other people. So I'm going to offer a free 15-minute coaching phone call to anyone that wants it. you can go to the website, thewholepersonpodcast.com, and sign up for that free coaching phone call. And if you're looking to have a longer, extended coaching relationship outside of that first 15-minute phone call, I have the prices right up front. I'm open about it, and I'd be more than happy to see if we'd work well with one another and can help you reach and achieve the goals that you have in life. Guys, thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the show.